Today on Between the Lines, what we can do to solve the most serious problems of our nation and our world with Rebecca Costa. Welcome. I'm Barry Kibrick. We're on the island of Puerto Rico taping this special episode right here on the coast in the governor's mansion. At first, this beautiful locale would be the last place you'd think of discussing issues related to our survival. But this mansion was once a fortress built for the survival of its citizens. My guest, Rebecca Costa, is a sociobiologist whose expertise is spotting emerging trends and how they relate to human evolution. With her book, The Watchman's Rattle, Rebecca confronts our most pressing global issues and offers solutions that are sure to provoke, engage, and even incite change.
Between the Lines with Barry Kibrick is made possible in part by
the government of Puerto Rico's tourism company, encouraging viewers to take a break and relax with a good book. Every page brings a new and exciting experience. Puerto Rico, a novel place to get away.
I'm a writer today because I was a reader when I was 11 years old, and it was...
You do not need to prove your state of happiness to anybody.
Most of these speeches were as much as a month in preparation.
Characters, the heroes in this book, are seekers of truth in a story that involves a lot of corruption.
You don't get a chance to really talk about what's real, and it's the perfect movie.
Rebecca, welcome to Puerto Rico and welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me today.
It's a pleasure. You know, I had the book, and when it first came, I love the title, The Watchman's Rattle, and I always know what that means, that little warning sign. But when I saw Thinking Our Way Out of Extinction, the subheading, I was a little standoffish. As I said, I don't believe we're on the road to extinction. So I went out in the backyard, just sat and relaxed a little bit, and my wife and son, who always are involved with the show but couldn't be here in Puerto Rico, they ran outside after they skimmed a little bit through the book, and they said, "Oh, Dad, you're going to love this book." And I go, "Really? I wasn't so sure why. I don't believe in this extinction thing." He goes, "Oh," my son says, "check it out a little bit." So I started reading, and then I realized what we had in common. It was the reason why I don't think we're on the road to extinction is because I believe we are going to be following all the things that you've got down here. So it felt a sense of not only a way of survival, but a way for us to thrive.
I'm glad you brought that up because I think that when we try to talk about extinction, people get concerned that it's going to be a gloom and doom book, and I'm far from that. I'm very optimistic that we may very well be the first society that doesn't have to collapse, doesn't have to go into some version of extinction. And that's why I wrote the book, because I'm very concerned about the problems that we now seem to not be able to fix that have gone on for generations to generation. And we seem to be foisting these off as they're getting larger and more dangerous, and we just don't seem to be able to get our arms around it. And that's what really propelled me to write this book.
And I love the perspective because you write about, and in fact you use some of the great civilizations in the past as examples, whether it's the Mayans, the Rome, and you said this though, I'm not particularly interested in what happened, I'm curious about why it happened, and did it happen overnight? And that's how you then begin to give us the ammunition.
You know, historians and anthropologists and archaeologists can argue about what specific event caused the cataclysmic collapse of these societies. And there are many, many books where people have decided it was disease or drought or it was war. You know, they have lots of theories, and the theories are buttressed by physical evidence. But from my perspective, do we really care? I mean, if we're going to collapse, I don't really care if it's a pandemic virus that gets us or it's a worldwide recession and economic collapse. I mean, these problems are stacking up like airplanes, one after the other, trying to all land on the same runway. And one of them is going to get you. So I think the argument over, no, the worst problem we're facing is climate change, or no, somebody else says, no, the worst problem we're facing is a global meltdown of the economic systems. I don't really care which one. I'd like them all to go away.
Well, you give us, again, the whole kit and caboodle is evolution. That's what this thing stems around. And we have to be patient, in a sense, with ourselves. What your words are, we have to come to terms with how we are wired. And when we realize that and come not only to terms, but almost at peace with it, that's when we're going to be able to begin to look at these things with a clear head, clear mind, an absence of fear, and it's really evolutionary based. We're catching up to ourselves, so to speak.
Well, we are. That's a very good point that you make. I'm a sociobiologist, so a lot of people say, well, what does that mean? I look at the cause of human behavior from a genetic standpoint. When people are acting in a particular way, I want to know if there's any biological reason they're behaving that way. When they hoard, when they cheat, when they lie, including when a society becomes gridlocked. Is there a biological reason and a biological imperative that we're becoming gridlocked? And it turns out that there is. When we look at these past civilizations, we see that at a certain point, they encounter problems that are too complex for the capabilities that the brain has evolved to that point in time. I mean, if you think about it, we're talking about two different clocks here. One clock that moves in million-year increments, that's the clock of evolution. 151 years ago, Charles Darwin discovered that evolution is very slow. And even if we need new features, for example, when I'm in my car, I need a couple of new appendages. I can't drive, drink my coffee, plug in my iPod and text, and I need those extra appendages, but they're not coming for billions of years. In that same way, our brains cannot necessarily adapt and develop new features in order to deal with the complexity that's changing in picoseconds. In terms of human progress, we're advancing in picoseconds. So eventually those two clocks have to meet.
You call that in the book the cognitive threshold. And one of the bridges that you talk about is this sort of a separation that has occurred between beliefs and knowledge, and how societies that when that occurs, that's when trouble begins. And we need to bring back both in the stream of our consciousness and in the dialogue and in the human knowledge that base we're going to continue to move forward for.
Mm-hmm. When we look back over ancient civilizations, we find that they thrive when there's a pursuit of both knowledge and an accommodation for beliefs. If you think about the human organism, this biological spacesuit that we're all trapped in, it has some limitations, and where facts and knowledge drop off, we have no choice but to rely on beliefs. By beliefs, I don't just mean religious beliefs. When I put my money in the bank, I believe it's going to be there when I write a check. I don't know it's going to be there till I go try to take my money out. When the traffic light turns green, I believe it's safe to walk. I don't stand on the corner and watch every car empirically come to a stop before I cross the crosswalk. So we have beliefs about a lot of things. Scientists have beliefs. I know there are some scientists who say beliefs are harmful to human societies. Richard Dawkins being one of them, for example. But we can't find a single society or civilization, even going way back to early times, where we didn't pursue beliefs. We drew little drawings to increase our fertility, help us capture larger prey, for all kinds of reasons, where we couldn't figure out how to do certain things. And scientists call their beliefs hypotheses, where they just have different language for it. I mean, every great scientific discovery was based on a belief.
That's what I was thinking. As you were talking, I'm saying, how could it have not been? Didn't it have to start that way even?
It has to start with a belief. And so one of the things that we know about this organism, this thing called the human being, is that it has an equal desire for beliefs and for knowledge. And when we don't have the knowledge, or the knowledge becomes too complicated or too difficult for us to understand, we revert over to beliefs. Now, that's not so terrible. What I've just told you, it's not the end of the world that we pursue beliefs and knowledge. But what does happen is, when we hit this cognitive threshold, the first sign is gridlock. We become unable to solve our problems. And the sign is that we begin passing them off from one generation to another, despite knowing they're very dangerous and they could annihilate a large part of the civilization. but we just become unable to fix them and we become paralyzed. But the second sign is a very dangerous one. We begin to abandon rational knowledge in the pursuit of fact, and we substitute facts with beliefs.
But again, and here's where we go back and forth with that notion and then the hope, back to evolution, insight. Insight, you tell us, is one of the key things that we're evolving with. And that insight seems to be the breakthrough in our human capacity that will break through the gridlock of a 2,000-page bill or whatever that case might be, as long as we begin to respect that insight. And I don't know if you can make it occur. It's like it's evolutionary, right? We have to allow it to occur. Maybe that's the best way to
Well,
to
we're
look
constantly adapting, right? We're adapting to whatever environment we need to survive. So today, it's not so much the physical environment that we're adapting to. Our brains have not changed really radically. When we became bipedal many millions of years ago, we grew, a third of our brain was the prefrontal cortex, and it grew to allow us to take in new information that we didn't have when we were on all fours. Suddenly we could see our enemies farther away, and we could, smell things better, and we had all kinds of advantages from an evolutionary standpoint. But our brain had to process that. So it developed a prefrontal cortex. And it's interesting that that is sort of the CEO of our brain. And it's also responsible for being able to deal with complexity.
Well, part of those beliefs and complexity, you call here these memes. And is that a scientific term, by the way? I'm curious where that came up with. You didn't invent the term, did you?
No, Richard Dawkins invented the term in his book, The Selfish Gene.
Okay.
And basically what a meme, a best way to understand a meme is it's a behavior or a thought that moves from one generation to another or travels virally. It's something that everybody accepts as the truth.
And that's part of that belief system that we're dealing with or have to work through in order to thrive. Again, I'll go back to that. So I want to go over some of those, the memes, so that people can be aware of what is it that we need to be aware of. And
well, I believe that certain memes, they begin infiltrating every aspect of our lives to the point where they become the obstacle to, they become an uber belief, so to speak, and they become the obstacle to allowing human societies to progress.
Well, the first one you talk about, irrational opposition. That's when you start to believe something, again, that's not real. I mean, I don't know how else you can put it, but yet it feels so real. That's what makes it this difficult thing. It feels real, but it's not.
Well, we've become very confused with opposing something and thinking that that's the same as advocating a position. When you are rejecting a position, make no mistake, you're not proposing a solution.
And what naturally follows is this personal blame. That seems to be on every level, whether you, in fact, I think it's not only when you're blaming someone else for the problems, it's when you're blaming yourself even. That's also a personal blame, literally and figuratively. So that's where I think the problem comes. Once you are so willing to blame, there's no more understanding. You can't sit back, rationalize, realize, because it's too easy. You can just say it's that person's fault, it's this thing's fault, it's that thing, and then it does two things according to what you say. It takes us out of the mode that it's systemic. It puts it on the person's shoulder rather than on the system, quote, not the system as a government or anything like that, but the systemic system of the universe, so to speak. Personal blame. Blame is always a problem. If you blame yourself for things, if you blame others, it gives you a chance to step away from true responsibility.
We don't believe that there are systemic problems when we can seek out the perpetrator. Then all we have to do is get rid of the person that's doing the wrongdoing. We put Bernie Madoff away and all of a sudden, it's safe. We took care of insider trading. We got rid of Rick Wagner out of General Motors, and suddenly General Motors now can build better cars. It's a bit of a mythology. And when you talk about turning it in on ourselves, I don't know about you, but I struggle with my weight constantly. And
not me.
I'm
I'm constantly
honestly,
at this weight.
Always.
No struggle. It's easy for me.
Always. And I know that I shouldn't reach for that last piece of pizza. I have all the logic and all the rationale and all the information. That isn't the problem. The problem is I watch my hand as I go and get it and put it in my mouth, and I'm enjoying it. And this is a real issue for me because I, as a sociobiologist, have to go back and say, gee, should I feel really bad about that? I had the data. I'm going to have to run on a treadmill for another 30 minutes. Why did I do that? That's a really horrible place to be. But the fact is, when I look back over evolution, I realize that my ancestors were very good high-calorie seeking food mechanisms. They could seek out, there could be vegetables and fruits, but if there was something fatty, they went for it. And that caused them to survive over the biological losers. So I am the descendant of people that were very good at seeking high-calorie foods, and then, worse than that, laying around and conserving the calories when they didn't need to fight or flee or go look for more food. But in those days, it wasn't a problem. Now, those urges, the vestiges of those desires that allowed my ancestors to live are still inside me. We are hardwired. Just as we accept that we're hardwired with predispositions for cancer or heart disease, I have hardwiring for my behavior as well. It's evolution. We collapse because we cannot, as a society, progress any faster than evolution will allow us to. This is the big discovery today.
But when we make that discovery, we gain the awareness. We are doing the right thing. That's why I said when I first passed the book, I was hesitant until I was reading and finding out you do believe the same thing.
I do.
We do choose the right thing most of the time. In fact,
we do.
So much so that if we didn't, we wouldn't be where we are. And no matter how people sometimes want to hearken back to a glorious olden day or some sort of past time when things were better, the truth is, no matter how you look at it, it's never been this good, and it's only going to get better because of those things you bring out in here. We've got this frontal lobe that is now developing insight, and with that insight and understanding, we are developing that awareness.
It's, our brains are responding to complexity right now. That's what is happening to us. The environment we have to survive is how to tackle highly complex and threatening problems. So when you think about it and you go back to the biology, if you always go back to the biology of the human organism to understand our behavior, then you approach the solutions in a radically new way. And I believe that this is the solution for moving forward. We will move out of the gridlock when we accept the fact that we are biological creatures. So when we begin to understand the limitations of our actual biology, what we've evolved to this point in time, we go about solving problems very, very differently.
Because you tell us, though, and if we pay attention to it, I'll use your words, the pursuit of knowledge, not just facts. Part of the problem is we're besieged with facts and information, and what we're missing is the knowledge. And that's the key to our thriving, is not facts and information. You can get the facts, you can get the information. We see the facts and information of those civilizations that came before us and didn't do so well.
Yes.
It's the knowledge, and I don't know if it's the same, or maybe there's even one more layer, wisdom. I'm not sure if wisdom is knowledge, or is wisdom even knowledge plus, but those things are working, and that's the real key, is not just that pursuit of the facts, and also you said that fighting of the ideologies. You tell us in the book, one of the key things, you think like a venture capitalist, you've got to throw up a lot of stuff on the wall. You can't be afraid of that failure, because the more you throw up there and the more you're willing to look at everything, hit it all at once, every idea, that's going to be the way we're going to get out of whatever situation we may get into later on down the road.
Well, imagine a situation where you hit a cognitive threshold and the brain has developed only so many capabilities, and now the complexity of the problems exceed the capabilities the brain has developed to this point. If that is the situation, complexity will eventually lead to high rates of failure. You'll become gridlocked, and you won't be able to choose what are the right solutions from the wrong solutions. One of the definitions of complexity is that there are many, many more wrong choices than there are right choices. So what do we have in our favor? What we have in our favor is we have models for high rates of failure. And the example I use is venture capital. Venture capitalists are not experts at success, they're experts at failure. For every 100 companies they invest in, 80 or 90 are going to produce minimal results or very poor results. But the 10 that succeed, if it's 10 in this economy, and maybe not, but the 10 that succeed are so fantastically successful that they dwarf the failures. Now that we see the pattern, now that we have these models for high failure rate, we can turn the course. I'm convinced of it.
And yet, you also calm us down. I know it sounds funny because of that high, intense energy you have and passion, but the truth is, one of the key things we need to do is take a break.
Yes.
Sometimes, according to you, and I think according to the great shamans of way back when, they knew that in this hectic, even whenever, it always is, by the way, I bet you every civilization felt it was hectic, even in just farming and agriculture or the hunters and gatherers. In that moment of time, we need to take that break because that's when those insights, those epiphanies, those answers are going to arise. So you let us know that even though we must act, we're not on the verge. We have time, we have experience on our side. We need to sometimes step back, think, and then with clearness, with purity of heart, as much as we can as human beings, that is going to be also a very key element, as much as throwing everything on the wall at the same time and seeing what sticks. Because if you can take that break, you'll still increase your odds a little better that the stuff you do throw on that wall will stick and be good.
You're absolutely right about that. There's, this isn't something that's woo-woo crystals and incense kind of thing. This is, we know how the brain works so much better than at any other time in human existence. We were able to put skull caps on people's heads and give them easy problems and then increasingly more and more complex problems. And what's interesting is that we see that the left and the right sides of the brain are busy working away, doing their thing that over many millions of years have been perfected. We're very good, rational, deconstructive thinkers, and we're also very creative. And sometimes the left and the right sides of the brain get activated and they both work. But every now and then, about 300 milliseconds before you're getting ready to solve a problem that you cannot solve any other way, you use your left side of your brain, your right side of the brain, a little part of the human brain called the ASTG lights up like a Christmas tree, and you have an epiphany. We watch it. We have film. We know when you're going to have a breakthrough on a problem that you have not been able to solve. Think about what happened to Newton. An apple falls on his head. Archimedes, he sits in a tub and the water falls over the sides. These insights, where you break through an enormous amount of complexity, they're legendary, they're historic. We just didn't have words for them, and we didn't understand in neuroscience what they were. But there is a third form of problem solving. We just aren't able to induce it. We haven't evolved to the point where we can just call upon an insight because we need it. Climate change, gee, we could use an insight right now. I would like to have more of them. So that led me to investigate what are the conditions under which we might facilitate greater insights, be able to use that third form of problem solving that's ideally matched to levels of complexity that the left and the right side problem solving can't break through.
One of those insights, I could talk about 1,000 of them, but I know we're out of time.
Oh,
so,
no.
but I won't end without this because I think this is part of it. It's the pursuit of happiness. One of the insights from our own Declaration of Independence, the growing evidence that being positive increases the probability of insightful thinking. Rebecca, thank you for sharing those possibilities.
Thank you so much for having me today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And thank you guys for joining us. Now, before Rebecca leaves, I would like to leave you with these words from the Watchman's Rattle. Destructive beliefs that threaten human progress are man-made and therefore not a permanent condition. So ordinary people can surmount entrenched super memes and once again restore the critical balance between knowledge and belief. I'm Barry Kibrick. Look closely between knowledge and belief, and we will restore the critical balance required for us to thrive. Thank you so much, Rebecca.
Thank you.
My pleasure, kiddo.
If you'd like to get in touch with us, want a DVD or transcript of our show, catch an episode online, or receive our weekly updates, go to www.klcs.org/BTL. Between the Lines with Barry Kibrick is made possible in part by
the government of Puerto Rico's tourism company, supporting literacy in America by encouraging reading anytime, anywhere. Each book a world to discover. Puerto Rico, the novel island.
When people are acting in a particular way, I want to know if there's any biological reason they're behaving that way, when they cheat, when they lie, including when a society becomes gridlocked.
On this episode of Between the Lines, Rebecca Costa. With her book, The Watchman's Rattle, she confronts our most pressing global issues and offers solutions that are sure to provoke, engage, and even incite change.